Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of AACRAO's Credential Chats. I am excited to be joined this week by AACRAO's own Mike Simmons. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Noah. Good to see you, and thanks for your help with this.
No, thank you. And we just want to upfront for anybody who's joining us live or who watches the recording. Mike and I were kind of joking beforehand that we spend so much time in the weeds on this that we need to hold ourselves accountable to ACRA's own credential confusion report and hopefully avoid getting too excited with jargon and saying stuff that is not necessarily at your dinner table conversation. We're gonna try and keep ourselves honest here, Mike, and it'd be one of the things that I'm really excited to dive in with you today is around the LER Accelerator Initiative. But before we go
Mhm.
there, something just recently at the Convergence Conference that was co-produced by ACRA and UPSIA that really resonated with me. I thought that would be a really cool starting place of, if learning doesn't make a sound, and I don't want to steal your words, so I'll maybe just let you drop your own wisdom there and then ask you about it.
Well, what I proposed was if learning happens in a forest and nobody knows it happens, did any learning occur? And basically, the idea there is that if we're not adequately expressing learning, if we're not showing what's happening in the institution, if a student can't adequately demonstrate what they've done, then does if no one knows, is it a thing? And that's a premise that the accelerator is sort of based on. It's a premise of our AACRAO's learning mobility work. The current transcript, we think, or I think, is increasingly silent. In other words, it had decades ago an extreme value. It was the way that someone expressed their credentials, their place in the employment hierarchy. And I think over time it has gradually gotten silent. Now, that's not to say at all that the transcript is not the base employment document, but it's not nearly as useful as it used to be. So, can we create an innovative set of credentials that is more explanatory, that has more information? And the final thing I'll say on that is, this whole concept of LER, learning employment records, the idea is it's a lens. It's a lens into what's happening. So many people are saying, what are you people? The you people statement. What are you people in higher education doing? And that's a positive and a negative statement. And we have an obligation and an opportunity to explain it. And so a more sophisticated learner record shows the breadth and width of the activities at the institution, all the ways students are learning, all the situations and scenarios, all the achievements and evidence that can be shown in these new types of records. So it's good. The other side is it also gives a lens. If that's not happening, there's no quicker way to look inside the institution and say, oh, it's really not happening. And I think so. It's both an external facing and internal facing, but allows us to examine what's happening. So that's why we think the LER is an innovative credential concept moving forward.
And Mike, I just want to be really clear that when I hear you saying that, one of the things that I hear, to go back to your analogy, is that registrars is how we ensure that the learning makes a sound. Like that we the office of the registrar is a really vital bullhorn, if you will, for learning making that sound that validates that it happened.
Yeah, and I think my observation in working with our members and registrars over the years is no no one of them stands up and says what you just said, because that's just not the way it's just by fundamental given though that everybody assumes. But you've stated it, and I'll restate it. The registrar is um, uh, the way that, to their products. What are the quote products that an institution puts out? Their students and their record. And more often than not, the record is the product, if you just think of it in pure theoretical terms. And who's responsible for that record? Obviously, the student is responsible for it in the end, but what it looks like and how extensive it is and how valuable it is and all those things, how useful it is, that falls in the registrar's office. So I think we're um, have an obligation again and an opportunity as a community of registrars and enrollment professionals.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to ask you about this LER Accelerator initiative
Mm-hmm.
that AACRAO is leading, but not alone. It's in collaboration with all these other organizations that our colleagues around campus are also members of and pay dues to, and that they also, to piggyback on the point you made, that this is not about a takedown of the transcript, that the transcript is still valuable, still has a purpose. This is expanding our notion of educational record and credentials to other needs that are out there, that the transcript serves very specific needs, and there's other needs that are emerging that these innovative credentials are going to be meeting, and that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like that's really where this initiative is going in collaboration with our other organizations in higher ed and beyond.
And so it's practical and it's theoretical. So the theoretical first, which is what we've talked about, that there's a general understanding that higher education is viewed as of less value generally. It's
Mm.
not serving one of its purposes for employers, which is to create a workforce, and that higher education has a lower esteem in the public eye and in uh, political circles. So there's that side of it, the theoretical. So what can we do about that? So the practical is, well, one way to do it is have a better representation of what's happening, and that's the LER. But to do that, there are a lot of people. It's not just a registrar. In fact, our data shows the registrar is only in a few instances the person who creates the conversation about an LER. There are stakeholders on every campus, and this coalition is a group of national associations and organizations that represent those stakeholders on campuses. And I'll throw a few examples. Most of the innovative credentialing right now is happening in the non-credit continuing professional education space. That's UPSEA, that organization. Or an IT shop will bring in a new technology. That's EDUCAUSE. Or the Career Center will have an initiative. That's NACE. I could go on down the list, but the idea behind the Accelerator Coalition is that each of these folks represents a door in which credentials are likely to walk through. And there's no magic, but what the magic is that at some point, most of these people on campus need to be involved in the conversation. So Noah, in your office, it might be that, as in your role, you introduce this concept to the campus. But I'll bet that you've had to bring in IT. I'll bet you've talked to the Career Center folks. I bet you've brought in faculty and curriculum folks. I could go on down the list. There are a number of people that you could bring to the table, and vice versa. And that's not been happening traditionally. It's hard to do because most folks in the associations, most stakeholders just work up and they're down their silo. So if you're a registrar, you look to AACRAO, and you don't really, know too much about other functions related to credentials. Or if you're in the Career Center, you may or may not think, well, I need to involve the registrar and this and that. I mean, eventually you get there, but what we're trying to do is accelerate that by making that just a given instead of an discovery, right? That's it. We're trying to move that ahead so that when these things are coming to campuses, you don't have to every time rediscover these relationships, which is what's happening now. Every institution, every initiative, and no, you and I see this all the time. They're all asking the same questions over and over again. It's like it's Groundhog Day, sort of, on a campus. And so this coalition hopefully can create enough resources and messaging to raise it up so we don't have that repeating phenomenon. That's the theory behind it.
And so for members who are, and the people we serve who may be, watching this, they're hearing, okay, so AACRAO's taking the lead. They're doing this in collaboration with all of these membership organizations that my colleagues, the groups that you mentioned, as well as research organizations, as well as advising and our community college colleagues as well, and AAC&U, and that there's these challenges that every campus is dealing with, but that our professional organizations, almost Captain Planet style, their powers combined can help us just they have the resources to identify the challenges and actually set some goals to help us figure out how to address those challenges.
One of the hypotheses of this is we all had relatively sufficient resources on the topic. At least, a majority of the associations had enough stuff. Like if you look at EDUCAUSE or us or UPSEA or even AAC, there's conversations going on. There are communities of practice about credentials, about micro-credentials, about LERs, about CL, whatever word you want to use. It's happening, but it's happening again once down the silo. And we were all saying relatively the same thing. So the first thing was, okay, what resources do we have and where are they in common? And so we identified probably, I'd say 70, 75% of same. Like stuff we put out at AACRAO is the same as something EDUCAUSE put out or whatever. So, okay, fine. You crosswalk that and you put it in the same place so people can look at it and see the various stuff. And then the second is where are the differences? And where those differences are, how do you bridge them? And the main difference has been in words. And, we've talked about this for years. No, it seems like it's probably been a year, but it seems like decades of what words use is important in some circumstances. In other cases, it doesn't matter. So we're saying LER here as the catch-all phrase. On your campus, they might call it micro-credentials because Noah, what's your title?
Micro-Credentials Program Manager.
Okay. So at University of Colorado Boulder, the whole concept of innovative credentials is conceived in that way. That doesn't mean it's not an LE, that's not a disconnect. It's simply that's on your campus, it may be badges. Another campus, it may be the CLR, whatever those words in terms of, what an innovative credential initiative, those don't matter too much. But then you get to specific words. So, as a registrar, Noah, that micro-credentials can also be construed as a set of academic experiences combined to make a subset credential. Doesn't have anything to do with the transport mechanism. So to some people, that's what a micro-credential means. So we're doing this crosswalking kind of, okay, when you say this, do you mean this? When an IT person says badge, they're probably thinking of a vendor who produces the technology that creates badges in an LMS, for example. They're not really thinking about all the stuff that goes in a badge or the assessment or the outcomes. That they're talking about the technology of a badge, or they may be talking about the standard of an open badge or a CLR. And so that work has taken us, first few months to really get over that. And we found we're far more agreement than where we differ.
I think anybody who's watching this is probably nodding along with like, yeah, we have all these different words to mean the same things, different things. There's a lot of confusion, so maybe they're feeling seen and can appreciate. Okay, it's not just me. Like other people are also dealing with this, and maybe there's some hope to be drawn from the super majority of the cases. We are aligned with our cross colleague. Organizational representatives, there's that, like, addressing the challenge of just expanding awareness and helping people just make meaning. Something else that really struck me at Convergence and that I'm hearing, listening to the leaders from AACRAO and these other organizations, is that this initiative is also coming from a place of urgency. And so maybe just with our final minute, you can, from your perspective, as AACRAO's lead on this project, share, where's the urgency of us, not necessarily having the luxury of being able to go slow in order to go fast and wait till we figured out all these little things.
Well, we chose the word accelerator specifically because the accusation from employers, philanthropic funders, foundations, and others was you people in higher education are not doing this. You're slower. Right. Us people, right? And that was the premise of it. And recognizing, probably the majority of higher education institutions are not really doing much about this yet. And that remains true. And so the question is, if we think this is a value, then why aren't they? And so the purpose of the accelerator is to have some hypotheses of why not create situations where it can go faster, and then have higher education be accelerated to catch up. So it's not about it's probably about the normal pace of higher education needing to speed up. It's not that this is not going to happen eventually, but by the time it happens at normal pace, it's probably too late. And that's not to be apocalyptic. It's simply to say the learn and work ecosystem and the skills-based hiring systems and all those kinds of things make opportunities for education that don't involve an academic degree increasing, and opportunities for irrelevant degrees and degrees which are not represented well less needed in the system. And so that's a gap. So how do we close the gap?
Do you know, and I just want to echo, one of the things I heard you say, so we don't, necessarily inadvertently end on a doom and gloom is that some of what this is coming from is an opportunity, that there's this challenge of, external stakeholders, constituents maybe questioning the value of post-secondary attainment, sorry, and that, one of the things I heard you say is that this is an opportunity for us through our credentialing to tell the story of why post-secondary attainment is valuable. That, learning employment records give us the opportunity to not just say this person was here and they did X, but actually to showcase and contextualize the learning and achievement that happens as part of a post-secondary learning and programming.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is it allows the student to create a narrative, and that's really what it's about in the long run. So we've talked about how the institution presents its activities and things, but really in the end, it's about allowing the student to have the power, the information, and the tools to present themselves in whatever way that they need to accomplish their goals. And that varies. But with learning and employment records, that seems to expand that option for students. And in the end, that's what it's about. We've talked about how this impacts institutions and higher ed, which is good. But in the end, it focuses on the learner, and that's why I think we're all in it.
Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for especially just, doing it. Just every guest, it seems like, always brings it back to centering our work on the learner. And so thank you very much. I think that's an awesome place to really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to join us to share about the OER Accelerator Initiative and AACRAO's perspective on it. Thank you so much for your time, Mike.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. And everybody, thanks for joining us. And we hope you have a badge-worthy week. We'll see you next time.